Early August 2018, I tried to break up a late night fight between my cat and my parents' dog, and I lost. Didn't realize at the time just how bad cat bites are, so the next morning when my hand swelled up I went to the emergency room, where they gave me antibiotics. I'd been on antibiotics twice already that year, for pneumonia and a UTI, so despite knowing my allergies to both penicillin and sulfur were on my chart, I made sure to request ones I wasn't allergic to, because duh. They gave me sulfur antibiotics and I almost died. 2 days later I'm back in the and get different antibiotics. I have good credit and would like to keep it that way, so paid off all my bills as soon as I received them. Drama with getting additional bills later to the point where I called and asked the registrant to go through my account to make sure I had paid everything, and if I hadn't, I would like to pay it over the phone. Cut to months later, when I get some very angry calls from a collections agency trying to collect on the bills I had already paid. It took a 3-way phone call between the collections agency and me to figure it out, but we figured it out. Cut to the past 2 weeks, where I have gotten 10 different emails asking me to review the one email every business day. How did we do? Reminder, give us your feedback, don't forget to review. So I did, on Yelp, Facebook, and Google, just like they asked. This place almost killed me with antibiotics that my medical history clearly states I'm allergic to. Then they had the nerve to send my already paid bill from their attempted manslaughter to a collections agency. I'm likely not the only person they've tried to bully into double paying a bill. Now it's a year later, and they've suddenly decided to hound me for a review. Paraphrased, you can call me Karen. This was 10 years ago in Iraq, at Cobb's Beecher. I was part of an aircrew that flew mission critical nighttime flights. I wasn't a pilot, but I flew in a support role in the backseat. We were lucky enough to each have our own little private rooms, called a chew, with an air conditioner in each room, and blackened out windows. It was easy to sleep all day, then wake up at 1600 hours or 1700 hours and head to work. We had big signs on our doors, day sleeper, do not disturb, come back after 1700 hours. The contractor in charge of safety and maintenance of the chews, it was KBR, I think, decided one day they needed to inspect the smoke alarms and fire extinguishers in every room. It's a reasonable request. My boss gave KBR a list of rooms not to disturb until after 1700 hours. Of course, they ignored the list, and we were all awakened to workers banging on our doors and letting themselves in. Just doing my job, sir. Air crews are required by civil and military law to have adequate crew rest. It's more than, hey, get some sleep. It's a strict number of hours before flying that should be undisturbed. It can become a very big deal legally if there's an accident and it's later revealed the pilot or aircrew member wasn't given a chance to properly rest. As inefficient as the military can sometimes be, it's amazing what a single well-placed phone call can do. My boss shamelessly cancelled the evening's flights and called Colonel Head Honcho to tell him why. We never saw KBR again. They avoided us like the plague. I used to travel for work fairly often, and the company I worked for had very strict reimbursement policies. You had to have a receipt for everything, or you wouldn't get refunded for it. On one trip I was staying in the center of mid-sized city, but the training I was attending was in the suburbs. There was a bus route I could take, and while it took a great deal more of my time it was way cheaper to take the bus than a taxi. $1.50 bus fare versus approximately $40 for a cab. Problem is, there's no way to get a receipt for riding the bus. So, I email my company's business manager and explain the situation. Ask if I can please get reimbursed for the bus fare without receipts. The response comes, no, any reimbursement requests without receipts will be denied, and I will have to cover the expense out of pocket. Fine. Cab rides, twice a day, for a week. Totally allowable within company policy. Fares plus tips, the total taxi expenses come to almost $500. My boss questions the request. I show her the email from the business manager and explain that I tried to take the bus, which would have totaled $15 for the week, but was told it wasn't reimbursable. Over the following weeks, heated discussion ensues between the business office and senior management. 2 months later, there's a new policy. Reimbursement requests for anything over $10 must have a receipt. Under $10, no receipt required. Talking a friend about this story and realized it fits here. My mum's youngest brother was born 15 years before me, and as such always had this weird thing that I show almost reverence to the fact he is my elder. He doesn't do this to my brother or my cousins, just me. When I hit 16 I went to a technical college in the UK to do my A-levels, and my uncle went back to learn to be an electrician. We would pass now and then when our classes had breaks and normally just nod in acknowledgement. One day after class I went into the town centre about 200 meters down the road and ran into my uncle William shopping. I said hi Will to him to get his attention. We had our usual chat about Jing as the only real thing we share in common, then said our goodbyes and left. The 20 minutes it took to get home, my dear Uncle William had called my mother and ranted about how I called him Will over and over and how I should call him Uncle William. I will point out neither my brother or I have called any of my aunts or uncles Aunt X or Uncle Y since we were about 8 or 9 years old, and none of them complained. Mum told him to not make a big deal out of it, but would speak to me about it. Later we had a laugh, but for the sake of keeping the peace just said to shut him up from whining. Shame my dear uncle didn't think this one through. He didn't like this classmates to know how old he was, and the fact I teased him that he was in class of people I went to school with drove him mad, and to complain to mum that I should never mention his age of fact he didn't have in GCSEs etc. Being the caring and loving nephew I did of course shout hey Uncle William any and every chance I got when I saw him at college. After the 3rd time he called, mum who just repeated that he should show respect and to lie in his bed. I admit I probably went out the way to ensure that on breaks from class we would go to where his class was having a coffee to go chat and say hello to my Uncle William, and if he could give grandma a message when he got home etc. I think it lasted no more than 3 weeks before my uncle had gone from calling mum to demand I always call him Uncle William to only when away from classmates. Then not at college, swiftly adding not in town either. Each demand met with my mother replying it's either all the time or none of the time, you can't pick and choose. I love my mum to eventually asking me to just calling him Will. This was because I spent a day calling him Uncle Big Willie for the afternoon and playing Will Smith at him cause I was 16 and a dick. Quite some time ago I used to work at Walmart, and honestly it was by far the worst job I've ever had. I could go on for hours about all the horror stories I have from that place. One story in particular I feel is a good fit here. You see, the store I worked in had a rule that if you see a spill, you are to guard the area to keep customers from slipping and falling. You were not to leave the spill for any reason while you flagged down another employee so that they could fetch cleaning supplies. Only managers and the cleaning crew had radios. I understand the logic here, as a lawsuit would certainly cost much more than an hourly employee's time standing next to a spill until it was cleaned up. However, there are a few issues with this in practice. I worked the evening shift in the meat department, and most days I was the only person in my department. I was situated between frozen foods and produce, which more often than not only had one person shifts as well, but they also closed much earlier than my department. This meant that I was the only person in my corner of the store for about half of my shift. If I came across a spill, there was no telling how long I would have to wait around for another employee to come by, because there was literally nobody else working in or around my area. Also, being in the meat department, we had multiple cleaning stations all around. One was always a few steps away. One day while working alone I noticed a small spill, so I stood next to it per procedure for about 10 minutes. In this time nobody, customer nor car walker, had even entered my view. I couldn't help but think how dumb this was, as I could see a cleaning station just on the other side of a bunker. I decided to throw in the flag and just go get the cleaning supplies and take care of it myself, because even if a customer did come around I could still see the spill and easily call out to them to watch their step. Unsurprisingly, I was able to make the round trip without any incidents. As I was cleaning it, a manager came walking up and took notice of me. "Manager, what happened here?" "Me, just a spill. I've got it all sorted." Manager, did you just happen to have cleaning supplies on you? Me, no, but they were just right there. I was able to fetch them without losing sight of the spill. Manager, that's not how we do things. Someone could have gotten hurt. Me, no, as I could have called to anyone that came near it. I was never more than a few steps away. Manager, doesn't matter. You should have stood next to the spill and waited for someone else to come by. This went on for a few minutes, but the manager was not budging, so I conceded. That was not good enough for him, as he then proceeded to write me up for negligence and unsafe work practices. I was livid, but I was also a college student and needed the job, so I just kept quiet and returned to my shift. A week or two later, as I was once again the only person working in my corner of the store, I happened upon another spill. This time I shrugged and decided to guard it, as if my job depended on it. I checked my watch and noticed that I had about 3 hours left on my shift, and had a small laugh at the thought that I might be standing in that spot guarding a puddle instead of closing my department. 10 minutes passed. 30 minutes passed. 1 hour passed. Around this time I was bored out of my mind, but then I heard a call over the intercom system that made it so much more worth it. We need an associate from the meat department to the back for a truck. This was followed by a few other calls for other departments for their trucks arriving as well. I started laughing out loud at this, because I knew that this meant that the very few people that were likely to come by my department were now at the loading dock unloading trucks, while I stood guard over my puddle. A few minutes passed before I heard the second call. We need an associate from the meat department to the back for a truck. I just stood there counting the lights on the ceiling. 1 hour left on my shift and there still had not been a single fellow employee walk by. I assumed everyone was starting to finish up their own trucks by this point, and would likely soon have to start unloading my truck as well. I was watching the minutes go by in anticipation, trying to decide if someone would come find me before my shift ended or not. I got my answer 15 minutes before the end of my shift, as the very same manager from before came storming through the meat department furious. We made eye contact and he stormed over to me and started yelling about how they have been calling for me to unload the truck and how they are now behind schedule and so on. Once he took a breath long enough for me to speak, I asked simply, "Can you go to a spill station and grab something to clean this up? I've been here a while now." He glanced down at the puddle next to me and I thought he was going to explode. "Manager, you mean to tell me that you didn't unload the truck because you were watching a spill?" Me, "Yes." "Manager, why didn't you just clean it up?" Me, "But leaving the spill would be unsafe for any customers. Besides, you wrote me up for doing that very thing recently, right?" The manager tossed his hands up in defeat and walked the 15 steps away to the nearest spill station and returned with supplies that he promptly gave me to clean the spill myself. "Manager, once you are done, go back to the loading dock and start on your truck." Me, "Sorry, I have only about 10 minutes left on my shift, and as I've been standing here guarding the spill I never got my second break. So I'm going to the break room for a bit before clocking out. You'll need to find someone to close down my department as well." At this the manager just stomped off in a rage. I cleaned up the spill, played on my phone in the break room for a bit, and clocked out with a smile on my face. I know that the manager just made someone else do all the work and wasn't personally affected by this, but knowing that I could be a thorn in his side was enough for me. A couple years ago, I worked retail in a store geared towards children. A very magical store. Lots of princesses, superheroes, rodents. You get the picture. Our store had about 25 female employees, including all of management, and 3 male employees. The dress code was incredibly strict. We had a uniform that had to be ironed all the time. No visible tattoos, only natural hair colors. Women were encouraged to wear makeup and style their hair. Men were either to be clean shaven or have fully grown in facial hair. For some reason, one particular manager was intent on nitpicking me regarding the dress code, even when I was in complete compliance of it. I was constantly told that I needed to iron it better, so I started getting it dry cleaned, and somehow that still wasn't enough. I wore very minimal makeup, and she constantly told me I should wear more, though she couldn't make me. Hair bows were a big thing at the store, and people made and gave us presents, custom ones highlighting characters. They weren't exactly against dress code, but they did push the limits. Regardless, this particular manager seemingly only had an issue with them when I wore them. Once, she got down on her hands and knees with a ruler to prove my pant hem was too long, only to be proven wrong. There were also some conversations about my appearance that, looking back, were definitely body shaming. As a side note, this particular manager was a natural brunette, but she dyed her hair black and bleached a portion of the hair underneath so that it would show. She was a self-proclaimed broho, if you need a more clear idea. Point is, her hair pushed the edge of what I would consider natural. I got the itch to dye my hair, and before working for the store, I had always loved to color my hair all sorts of colors. However, with the dress code, only natural hair colors were allowed, so I came up with a compromise: silver. I went and had my hair professionally lightened and dyed silver. The next day I worked, the district and regional managers were visiting the store. I was always picked to work those days because I had the best stage presence and knowledge of the company, and those two were always impressed by me. When I showed up to work that day with my new shiny silver hair, my store managers were appalled. They wanted to send me home immediately, and for whatever reason they decided to talk to me in front of the higher ups. This is a paraphrasing of the convo. You're in major violation of the dress code. How so? Your hair isn't a natural color. Yes it is. Gray is a natural color. But you aren't gray yet. So it looks unnatural to be all gray. Are you saying that we can't dye our hair at all if it's not a color that would grow out of our heads naturally at this moment? No, you can dye your hair, it just can't be obviously fake. It needs to look real. I pointed at the manager, who was constantly on me. Your hair is half black and half bleach blonde. I feel like that looks more unnatural than my gray hair. I turned to the higher ups and asked if I was in violation. They agreed with me that I was not. I also showed them one of my bows and they fawned over it and even asked me for directions on how to make one. In the end, I got to keep my silver hair and my bows, and my manager was told that her hair actually was a dress code violation and she had to dye it before coming in the next day. If you enjoyed the stories, slap the like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.